It's about 0.7 millimeters per year on average. We're sinking, and that contributes to how much sea level is changing as well. So there's a lot of good things with it. Report takes into account that we come down, the international groups that are studying this, and really downscale it for Connecticut. What can we expect in terms of sea level rise and sea level change in Connecticut? Next piece are 4 projections based on different assumptions. And what this represents is a range of possible outcomes based on these different assumptions from scenario to what we feel is plausible as a worst case scenario. Both in the near term up to 2050 and then to the long term up to 2100. So one of the interesting things is that there's not a great spread between how high sea level is likely to change between these different projections. So the projections are in agreement for the most part about how much we're going to see sea level change in the near term to 2050. And partly that's a function of that the sea level rise that we're experiencing now and over the next 30 years is a response to the warming of the previous century. So, no matter what happens with emissions and greenhouse gas emissions over the next 30 to 50 years, there's a certain amount of sea level change that's already been built into. That's reflected here, and Circa recommends that the David plan for up to 20 inches of sea level rise by 2050. And we'll see that that has some impacts on the frequency of flooding, but there's a pretty broad agreement between the different scenarios on that number. And that the confidence in that prediction is a little increased since this was reported, and there was a new national report that's come out from NOAA this year that basically confirms the likely estimate. Between today and the next 30 to 50 years. So, and that's reflected in these different, divergent sort of scenarios here. If emissions are they start to decline towards the end of the century, then the upper bound of that range is reflecting the orange and yellow lines. So that we could expect up to the 3 to 4 feet of the last even with the century infall. And the magenta line is the most plausible worst case possible scenario, which is where there's a rapid melting of global ice sheets, and that's partly due to no decline in emissions. So at the present rate through the end of the century, then that projection becomes more plausible. So to summarize, we recommend that towns plan for up to 20 inches of sea level rise by 2050. There's also a group at Econ in 2019 that put together a report to look at temperature. And so they're planning for the temperature. Okay. So the findings from that report, which focus on temperature, precipitation, so the other impacts on sea level rise. So their findings, they looked at a scenario in which emissions do not come down. So the sort of the worst case emission scenario. But their findings revealed that the state of Connecticut is planning for an increase in our temperature of about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's the average temperature over the whole state. But we'll see that has an effect on the different metrics of extreme heat, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in They also found that we're likely to see an increase in the average precipitation over the course of the year, but that precipitation will start to become flashier. So we'll get more precipitation in a shorter amount of time, but we'll also see an increase in evaporation. So because the temperature is increasing, that changes the balance of evaporation precipitation. So it's possible that we could see a reduction of water that's available for the state by 20%. That's a possibility. And so there may be an increased risk of drought. We're in the middle of a spring and summer in which we had pretty severe drought conditions. So this is a possibility that we can start to see this type of behavior. Beyond that, we recommend that we continue to update this every 5 to 10 years for the state. So that's something that CERCA is taking up the next update of this guidance in 2023. Okay, so given all that, I think the findings from our research is that these seemingly small changes, these averages, can have big impacts in terms of flooding, in terms of the different extreme heat events, and different ways in which this impacts our state. I mean, we probably all heard a little bit about the 100-year storm and how that might change and think about hurricanes, the risk of hurricanes. That's always been a risk for Connecticut and will continue to be a risk. But this is where I think we'll start to see how the sea level rise is coming out. And, the National Weather Service, when they talk about flooding, they talk about these different thresholds of flooding. So there's minor flooding, moderate flooding, and major flooding. Depending on how high the anticipated flood is supposed to get, they'll issue a warning, warning, that sort of thing. So what we're expecting to see as a result of the change in sea level is that the frequency of these types of floods are going to change. So for instance, minor flooding, that happens when we get about 1 to 2 feet of storm surge currently, and that's sometimes called nuisance flooding. You might have a few streets that get flooded, generally not as damaging, but can be a nuisance. So that currently we experience that a couple of times a year. Basically, we have an astronomical high tide, and we'll have storms in time. So in the future, we're going to be in the current state of minor flooding that we know today. So for moderate flooding, this is where you get about 2 to 3 feet of inundation from storm surge. It's a little more damaging, a little more dangerous. You might have to evacuate from low-lying areas. So currently, we get these types of moderate floods every 3 to 5 years. A big nor'easter or a big snowstorm that causes a storm surge. So in the future, we're going to have moderate flooding as much as we have minor flooding today. So we're going to have moderate flooding a couple of times a year as a result of the sea level change. So major flooding, this is the bigger storms that we kind of remember that have names and tropical storms. We'll get 3 to 5 feet plus of inundation, major flood. National Weather Service will issue coastal flood warning. It's much more damaging and dangerous. Low-lying floodplains, people need to evacuate, and they're much more expensive to repair the damage. So currently, when we look back at the record of storms, we have major floods every 10 to 15 to 20 years. They're not all Superstorm Sandy, but there's been some big storms that cause this major type of flood. So right now we have it every 15 to 20 years. In the future, we're going to have major flooding as much as we have water flooding today. So we're going to have major flooding every 3 to 5 years as a result of the sea level change. And so this, what they call machine change for flooding, is one of the big impacts that formation of sea level rise has on, not necessarily flooding the whole city in putting the whole city underwater, but places that do flood are going to start to flood more often and flood deeper and more severe. And this is just a graphic where, where we do this kind of analysis. I think I'm going to skip over it for time's sake. But, we're using data to kind of look at the record of storms, and these little blue boxes are actually all individual storms that have occurred over the last 100 years. And, that's sort of what's underpinning some of the analysis. Okay, so that brings us to the city of New Haven itself. And we'll take a look at some maps and we'll just briefly kind of go through some of the areas that are known to have flood issues, which many of us are aware of and familiar with. But just where is partly a function of just elevation of the city. And New Haven, like much of the Connecticut coast, has areas of high elevation, areas of low elevation. You really see this like mixture of different topographic conditions. And areas that are shaded darker in this image here are areas that are at low elevation. Those are the places that, due to their elevation, are, in some cases, they are pretty frequent floodplains. So we've got the area of Longworth, obviously, which has experienced floods before. You've got the area along the West River, up to Westville. Got the area around the port, which is also low on, has some flood risk. You got the area around East Shore in Morris Cove, the area around the airport where the tidal launches are, all low line. You've got in the neighborhood of Fairhaven in particular. You've got different areas all around the neighborhood along the edges. In particular, the southern and the western edges of Fairhaven, where there's low-lying areas that are subject to flooding. There's also Middletown Avenue in that area of Foxton Boulevard. That's all pretty low. These are the areas that are going to face most risks from this increase in flooding. And this is a map that some folks have sort of put together. This is actually a computer simulation of the flooding from recreated what areas of the city flooded from Sandy. The colors are actually the depth of the flood. So you see the yellowish, greenish colors, that's deeper indication. So again, this tracks pretty much with the parts of the city that have lower elevation. You've got Longworth, you've got West River, you've got parts of Fairhaven and Middletown Avenue. It's part of the port and the area of the shore around Morris Cove. Quite a few residential properties that are damaged. And this is just a map to show what sort of county buildings, what type of land uses buildings are in these locations. And this is done as part of the Surface Building Connecticut project, start to understand what zone in the city we're facing risk, something we call zones of shared risk that we try to map out. And this is how we can start to develop adaptation strategies and try to coordinate the response to stakeholders, different land uses. So this is sort of what it looks like. This is a picture of coastal flood as we understand it. But this is not just the coastal flooding issue. So again, we talked about the precipitation changes. There's a number of hot spots where the drainage system, there's enough rainfall in a short period of time, and the drainage system can accommodate that rainfall, and we start to see this stormwater flooding. And this map over here is actually from the National Hazard Mitigation Plan. So there's been a lot of work that the city's done and has been doing to understand where those hotspots are and develop projects. There's been pre-infrastructure projects and infrastructure projects. A a lot going on, but that's all I'm going to be honest. In this photo here, this is from Humphrey Street. So this is an area where the road goes under the Amtrak line. And, it's a problem when there's a lot of rain in short period. This is a photo from Milltown Avenue. So again, that stretch of Milltown Avenue as it goes to the northeast is one of the more low-on and more vulnerable stretches of road. So this is something that the city is trying to address as well. Okay, so quickly, we're pressing time, so quickly about temperature. So, the 5 degrees Fahrenheit increase that we expect 5.50, that results in similar pattern of sort of extreme temperature events. Modeling of how this extreme temperature events is going to play out also has that same characteristic of increase. And that report that we had commented in 2019. When we look at this, some of the things they look at is the nighttime temperature. So when the nighttime temperature does not drop below 68 degrees, something they call tropical nights. And on average, the state experiences about 10 weeks across the whole state. But with that increase in average temperature, we're likely to see that increase by a factor of 4. So that's a big increase in the need for air conditioning. The quality of the energy systems in the buildings, air quality concerns, all of these are to have. And that also goes for just extreme temperatures where we see the temperature above 90 degrees, 100 degrees. Both of those are expected to increase by a factor of 4 and 5 with that increased temperature. That, as I said, has a big impact on air quality. We know from research that heat in particular has affects different populations. Dr. Mitchell's going to talk a little bit more about the environmental justice and how the issue actually starts to become front and center when we talk about heat impacts and how we respond. So at Circle, we try to start to view this. We produce flood maps and understand where parts of the city are vulnerable to flooding. We started to try to do the same thing with temperature. So this is something we did last year, something called the Heat Vulnerability Index. So this is basically showing the relative vulnerability of different locations across Fairfield and counties. And this is a map for New Haven. And there's a lot of different data that goes with this. It has to do with the age of the buildings, it has to do with the density of the buildings and the density of the population. It also has to do with some of the socioeconomic demographic factors. You look at all these different things and you get a picture of what parts of the state, what parts of the city might be more vulnerable to extreme. So in New Haven, what we found is that Fairfield in particular is an area that appears to have more vulnerability to extreme. But then you also see some other pockets in the area around the port. This corridor that goes up to Shoreline, which makes sense. There's probably a lot of parking lots and a lot of pervious surface, not a lot of trees. So there's different parts of the city that we see as particularly vulnerable to extreme. Okay, I'll just very quickly give a plug for a project that Circa is doing partnership with the city. So this is really encouraging. So this came out of a project that Circa is doing in Fairfield and counties to develop plans, pilot projects. And Fairfield due to the vulnerability to flooding and the vulnerability to heat, that really emerged as a place where we prioritize some resources to be planning. We're working with the city to basically get a picture of the existing and future conditions includes looking at some of the drainage. Fairhaven has all these underpasses and bridges, and each of them has their own particular risks, whether it be stormwater or coastal flooding. Sometimes there's combinations of the two. So we're going to be looking at all of that, and then also looking at some of the mitigation options for developing some concepts, hopefully developing some projects that can help the city hopefully help the city to take advantage of some of the investment opportunities, federal government, city government, for projects, and help the city move forward with a more resilient approach for some of the issues there. All right, so that's my portion. Emails here on our website. You're up next. For questions.
While we're switching over, I just want to recognize my colleagues that are here, Alderman Martin and Alder, and thanks for joining.
While we're switching over, I'll go ahead and begin. Again, my name is Dr. Mark Mitchell. I'm an associate professor of climate change, energy, and environmental health equity at George Mason University, where I work remotely from my home in Hartford. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the need to invest in climate justice in the Okay. So I started the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice. I'll talk about why I started the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice. I'll define some terms of systemic racism, environmental racism, environmental justice, climate justice. I'll talk about health disparities related to the environment and some common environmental justice issues. And then I'll talk about the health effects of climate and make some recommendations. So I am a public health physician. I was the director of the Hartford Health Department in the early 1990s. And there I noticed that environmental exposures correlated with the illnesses that we were seeing in the city, as well as death rate and particularly in the disparities, in health disparities, seem to be more related to environmental related diseases than non-environmental related conditions. I also noticed that the political business grasshoppers interest at that time did not line up with the community health needs. I'm sure that this is different in the paper. And we found that grassroots organizations have the political power to change the government focus and action. So let me switch to definitions. First of all, what is systemic racism? Systemic racism is not an insult, it's a description. It describes policies that involve multiple institutional disciplines that have disproportional racial effects. It has nothing to do with the intent, it has to do with the effects. Examples of policies that have differential racial effects, that is systemic racism, are policing policies. The laws are the same for everybody, but some laws are enforced differently depending on race. And we know that from church towards death, the South policies, the justice system, The incarceration rates for women and Latino men is much higher. Housing policies, economic policies, financial health systems, educational policies, all of these have this differential impacts. We know that housing is the primary way Americans build their wealth. And if you don't have access to home ownership, you cannot acquire wealth, and that leads to all of the economic disparities and some of the other. So all of these act together to reinforce each other, and that's why it's called systemic racism. So environmental racism is systemic racism. The greatest predictor of where environmental hazards are located is the percentage of people of color. That's true in Connecticut, that's true nationwide, and that's true globally. The greater exposure to environmental hazards leads to poorer health. I've done consulting with environmental justice groups all across the country, and they suffer disproportionately from the air toxics that they're exposed to. And you can predict what diseases they have based on what their exposures will be. So racism, in fact, is a toxicant in cancer. That is, if you're exposed to a certain level of a toxicant and you experience chronic racism and or chronic poverty, then you will react more to that exposure. So you will react at lower levels than predicted. So it's a toxicant in cancer. So what is environmental justice? Environmental justice is about stopping environmental injustice and changing the environmental policies to reduce this disproportionate health impacts. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of people, regardless of race or color, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws and policies. So what is climate justice? Climate justice is simply environmental justice applied to climate change policies. Environmental justice organizations are community-based organizations led by people of color, low-income people, or those otherwise most impacted. They often see their mission as a broad one to address the related issues of health, climate, economics, and racism. So examples of how health disparities are tied to the environment are many. For example, West Indian Afro-Caribbean immigrants are better health than African Americans, but that changes after one generation, where their health drops down to that of African Americans. Asthma is 50% higher in urban school districts in Connecticut compared to rural school districts. The asthma death rate, as you know, we have a very, very high asthma rate in Connecticut. The Haven and Hartford have the highest asthma hospitalization and emergency room visitors. And as policymakers, you would be interested to find out that 75% of that cost is paid for by taxpayers, Medicaid, Medicare, others. We can reduce asthma, not only can we reduce costs. So asthma deaths are 6 times higher in black males between the ages of 13 and 24 than white males of that same age. And more than half of the boys and children in Connecticut are quite much younger. There are many other diseases that are associated with the environment, including cancer, diabetes, lupus, depression. ADHD has been shown to be related to air pollution from transportation. Low birth weight, we're talking about heat is associated with low birth weight, premature birth, sudden death, etc. All of those things are associated with the environment. So we're talking about heat today and flooding. Heat kills more people than than hurricanes, than tornadoes, than flooding, than the next 5 leading causes of weather-related death. So heat is really, really important. And Just wanted to list, for your reference, common environmental justice issues, things like landfills and dumps, waste transfer stations, brownfields, air toxins such as trash incineration, sewage sludge incineration, and other incinerators, indoor air contaminants, water contaminants from chemical and pharmaceutical plants, fish contaminated with mercury or PCBs, like we have here in Connecticut. Other issues such as local businesses, such as auto body shops, dry cleaners, nail salons, chrome plate facilities, industrial pollution such as refineries, chemical plants, some of the other things that are commonly seen in environmental justice. Air pollution, I want to talk specifically about air pollution. Air pollution contributes to COVID-19, morbidity and mortality. It contributes to, of course, asthma, other respiratory diseases, but it also contributes to cancer, and heart disease, and, like I said, learning disabilities. So air pollution sources are most commonly located in communities of color. This is a map of Connecticut, and the blue shading is the percentage of people of color in each census block group. The red dots are the air pollution sources, they're not traffic air pollution sources. Most towns, as you know, Connecticut is the second most densely populated state, so there are people in all parts of Connecticut. Most towns have no red dots, they have no major significant sources of air pollution other than traffic. The larger dots, you see that there's more, you see there's a correlation between the percentage of people of color and the amounts of air pollution. I'll give you a couple of examples. Bridgeport has the highest amount of air pollution of any town in Connecticut with 1,650 tons. The Wheelabrator, the trash incinerator, accounts for about 3/4 of that. And then there are two power plants that account for another quarter of their air pollution. So these facilities don't have to be located in Bridgeport to provide the same services in any of the other countries that they can in Bridgeport. Yet they tend to be located in Bridgeport, Hartford. So the number one, so Bridgeport's number one in tons of air pollution per year. Hartford's number 2. Now Middletown's number 3, and New Haven is number 4. So New Haven has in 2020 had 320 tons of air pollution per year. Yale accounted for about 15% of that, but most of this is from the oil storage tanks. We see Carolyn Enterprises, Shell oil products, Gulf oil. We see Buckeye PT Terminal, Forbes Terminal, Magellan Terminal. And then there's a power plant. The PSEG power plant produces 22 tons in 2020, and then the sewage incinerator, further the Haven Water Pollution Control Authority, 48 tons of pollution. So again, most of these could be located anywhere in Connecticut. Most of these other storage facilities could be located anywhere along the coast. But they tend to go to the large urban areas with the largest, most vulnerable population. So people are, so what does this have to do with climate? So climate change, people who are vulnerable to air pollution, climate change makes things worse or provides greater risk. If there's some kind of a natural disaster, let's say that there's and it affects the storage tanks, who's going to be affected? Not me and Hartford, but the people who live around the storage tanks. So if there's a hurricane or whatever. So in addition to having the other water, the wind, the power outages, you have to be concerned about these other hazardous facilities nearby. So all people are talking about climate change, but some are more than others. The people who are most affected by climate change have generally contributed to the problem the least. They're people who live in apartments. They don't live in 20-room mansions that they have to air condition and spend lots of electricity doing that. They live in smaller, more compact. So they contribute less to greenhouse gases. Many people see climate change as existential threat, but environmental justice communities see climate change as just another existential threat. We're concerned about the air pollution from the sewage treatment plants, the asthma that we're getting from traffic-related air pollution. Those are daily threats, existential threats. But climate change is just another existential threat. So first, I also show that African Americans and Latinos are more concerned about air pollution and water pollution, but not as involved. But we know that climate solutions are health solutions. If we address climate change, we have immediate health improvements, and they can be made so that they are equitable and anti-racist. So we have lessons from Hurricane Katrina. So when you think of Hurricane Katrina, what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Do you think that it's the costliest hurricane on record, which it was? Do you think that it's the Corps of Engineers failure with 5 flooding breaches, which it was? Do we think it's an excellent example of resilience, where 90% of people are dying, which is true, and 99.5% of people survive? That's true, too. So obviously, most people think that Katrina was a failure. The most vulnerable people were left behind. The response was mostly judged on the death and even toll of the disaster on those who are most vulnerable. There are many things that could have been done to reduce human suffering and death, and primarily participation by the most vulnerable people in the planning process and response could have helped prevent much of the suffering. So, who did it? It was not predictable. Who would predict something like Hurricane Katrina that could possibly happen? Who would know how the residents without cars would be notified about transportation options? Who could know where and when people without cars were supposed to board evacuation buses? Who knew that some people would not board buses if they didn't know where they were going? Who knew that many would not leave their homes without their pets? Who knew that many would not leave their homes without the assurance of the security of their homes? Who knew what would happen to disabled, those in hospitals and nursing homes? Who knew who were the trusted messengers in the beginning? If the community were involved in planning, we would take advantage of this. These are the kinds of questions you should be asking those who are also. So we talked a little bit about the temperature in Connecticut, right? It will rise 5 degrees in the future, but it's already risen 3 degrees. So what are the health effects of climate change? I developed this mnemonic called heat wave, where the health effects are heat, direct heat illnesses, exacerbation of heart and lung conditions, asthma, injury, traumatic injury, water and foodborne illnesses, allergies, vector-borne diseases, and emotional stress. So, what are the recommendations? Again, all people are affected, but some are more affected. You need to plan for the most vulnerable, who will reduce the suffering and save the most lives. Which population is vulnerable? It depends on where they are. It varies by geographic location. It varies by block to block. It varies by your demographics. So if you reach out to those communities, these populations often have the experience, expertise, and information needed to develop more effectively. They know which streets flood they're doing. They know how to get out, or what's the best way to get out. Higher local adaptation planning is needed. The threats and responses vary widely across the state, and there should be state funding to pay for planning for each town. The people who are most affected need to be included in the planning. The Governor's Council on Climate Change, GC3, and state agencies can provide information, tools, and guidance. As part of the GC3, we've published a guide for incorporating equity into municipal planning to identify which populations are most at risk, to help you figure out how to engage those populations in planning. But there are just not enough environmental justice voices to support the environmental justice needs, particularly here in New Haven. We need more environmental justice organizations. What do environmental justice organizations do? They reach those most at risk. The government can't reach. A lot of larger nonprofits will not be able to reach. They help empower the most affected by education on environmental policies so that they can have meaningful input into those policies. It helps develop and advocate more effective and more just policies. They can provide information on how their policy affects people on a day-to-day basis. Their health, economics, and quality of life. They can assist government in decision making. They're good at making prioritization. Government is, as a former government employee, it's hard for us to make decisions about prioritization, but unions can help with that. And they can assist in evaluating the effectiveness of programs. They can also develop leaders, develop community leaders, and promote democracy, as in the meeting. So there needs to be funding, both state, local, and private funding, to make sure that there's education. And my goal is that there's a $2 million pot in Connecticut for base funding for environmental justice, 500,000 from foundations and 1.5 million from government sources. This can help to build capacity organizations to apply for state and private funding, and build capacity to apply for state and federal funding, and provide support for education and climate resilience and environmental issues. So lastly, I wanted to leave a thought with you that the world will never be as it was before COVID-19. If we're wearing gas here, you know that things are very good. But if we're deliberate about our efforts, we can make things better and be more prepared to address public health issues, address the climate crisis, and address systemic racism all at the same time. So let's plan on coming out of the pandemic to a more prepared, just, and thank you. Goodbye.
The top right.
Good evening, Doug French, Director of the Office of Climate Planning for the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. My office is located in Johnson, Commissioner. Our office looks across 3 branches of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection: Energy Division, Environmental Conservation, and Environmental Quality. Now we're talking about some solutions. Rachel went into the explanation of healthcare, some programs that we're developing at EDP to help address impact. A lot of work on reducing emissions as well as focusing on the impact of if I mentioned the previous two presenters, it's been called the Governor's Council on Climate Change. This was convened by Governor Watt through Executive Order 3. It met convened in September 2019. It convened 7 working groups in areas, multiple areas, including public health, food equity, and justice, policy, infrastructure, and came up with this report of near-term actions that states can take. People want to highlight the quantity picture of the student infrastructure project covered. Governor West was located with one of the councils providing it outside the urban resource. Well, when we're thinking about the scale, this report talks about emissions reduction strategies like state investment in offshore wind, renewable power generation, and addressing precipitation changes through the infrastructure investment. This is funded by a grant of federal grant and standard recovery that came through the Connecticut Department of Housing and Urban So one of the outcomes of that Governor's Council on Climate Change policy 3 was a governor's bill introduced by Governor Watt for the concerning climate change adaptation. It was passed into law in 2021 session, and this bill was really a municipal toolbox and added different authorities that municipalities would take advantage of that help give more tools at each municipality's discretion to be able to use to help build resilience from policy government side of the equation. So one of the things it did was add flood prevention, climate resilience to the purview of municipal flood and erosion control. Existing authority books on flood erosion control roads but it's never been updated to include climate because the kinds of things that it's addressed. So we renamed it, started with mouthful. I further down with the climate resilience board, but it is not mentioned climate resilience board. They can undertake a wide range of climate resilience activities. We can utilize nature-based solutions. We are mitigating what nature can do is like storage, using waste pipes, storing our floodplains, and preserving open space and future migration of wetlands. The flood erosion control board already has a lot of authority around all right, infrastructure, flood walls, sea walls, piping, big pipe cement, kind of flood control measures the added nature component. The board directs the cabinet mitigation of resilience plan and prioritize vulnerable communities. Not the talking about, and to consult with them. That's straight to all that. So all the tools and knowledge that is brought. The board can use municipal climate change and coastal information reserve funds as well as state, federal, and private dollars to build, operate, and maintain any climate change. Reserve funds actually referring to the bill that municipalities should have the authority to set aside funding to build a reserve for funds, specifically for coastal communities. I think at this point only one municipality in the state has set up the one. The authority, and also the landlord will have authority for entering property, bonds, taxes, property owners, and other things. They're actually already part of all existing authorities for the road. They can establish districts to implement flood erosion systems and use that authority to implement flood prevention practices. Another image of a nature-based solution, kind of Stratford that use balls to bring away so they can restore behind it, especially with brownfield sites, whether the erosion is brownfield sites causing lead shots to be exposed to the These boards of supporting permit and storage system, set value property infrastructure, and natural resources. Now, this helps us prioritize and protect vulnerable communities and for expenses. We developed a fact sheet following the passage of that law that provides additional analysis correctly. That fact sheet has called get a better understanding of what the word is, how it's and the law also expanded the Green Bank. The Green Bank is known in the state now, really nationally, but not really national. But model of our state, right? Our state Green Bank largely been working in the renewable energy space, using private dollars, leveraging some public dollars to bring in more private equity to invest in renewable energy. Taking that same model and trying to apply it to environmental infrastructure. And so it basically expanded their authority. They can work in water waste and recycling, climate adaptation of land, here, but also agriculture, land conservation, parks and rec, for the market, that's another offset. Very broad authority. They can use their bonding authority, they can use funds, investment, and they can act for bond issues for 50 years. And not in finance systems. So this is in a planning stage, I just tell you, we may have come out with their initial plan. But this is an opportunity for municipal government and also private entities to work with the Green Bank to projects. At least we are not in the finance table, but my office is leading the development of these kinds of funds, the grant funds, backed by state bonds, and those support connected communities and resilience planning and current climate change. The goal behind this is to foster development of resilient project pipelines that compete with federal funding. Solar resilience capacity in the state. Very important here that the statute behind this program and our program developing it requires at least 40% of funding the work of this program and benefit for communities that does include environmental justice communities, which are required by state statute. This map is a map of environmental justice communities, which includes all the distressed municipalities, or any census blocks where 30% of the population is 200% below federal poverty level. That includes a large part of the here. So any resilience projects that benefit these communities here are in that priority area. It will be prioritized in this program. We're very close to releasing all the applications. I'm sure we'll be happy to all the data creating. So the state taking this investment in resilience planning and initial project development because of reading in the news about all the opportunities under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, other or infrastructure law, those are the things. That infrastructure law costs up, increased significantly. A lot of funding to existing resilience programs that can go with that resilience. That includes a program called the FEMA Building Resilient Infrastructure Community Program, or GRIP. So FEMA, sorry, this one's actually private disaster. So you touch this one, that one is good disaster. Flood mitigation assistance programs and mitigation funding, National Fish and Wildlife Federation, National Lakes Fund, $30 million program, $140 million program. The Long Island Future Fund, which is on that Long Island Sound, $1 largely defined with Medicaid work. You know, again, that's kind of about $1 million program. It also created brand new programs that are actually being announced on a daily basis. These are ones that were announced June 29th by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a new program called Habitat Restoration Land Grant, a program that was the habitat restoration of the place, but targeted at underserved communities in particular. So the federal government is doing great deal of money to the grant program. You know, I started working in the lake, and it was about $25 million for a national program so far. Now they just announced that there was a program. So this is really transformational federal funding. We're trying to help our communities, which are largely out these programs on state, usually municipalities, to be ready to have good products and continue to manage all these opportunities.
Thank you for your presentation. They were very interesting, enlightening, and I'm glad to see that the federal government is also investing more dollars in challenges and concerns that we have with funding meetings. At this time, I will open up the floor side, Alex. So, Alex, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. All questions are answered. All the records.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What's the size of the resiliency, climate resiliency fund at the state level? And having more information about the timeline of those opportunities?
Yes, yes, so the program released a astrological for spring, was provided with our initial training, got public feedback on that. So it will, we have, the budget, the authorization is currently 30 million. Probably not release all of that in round one. The first one is on program like this scale. So I think we're likely to go to about the 10 million range. Sure. Seems like we're going to get a lot of interest based on people who they do that on our job proposal. But yes, the program could really timeline, we're trying to figure out that this is not the service. So we should be seeing some earlier results.
Dr. Mitchell mentioned trying to build a fund for specifically focused on environmental justice. Is that something that he is contemplating or other state agencies?
Yes. So I'm looking at John because this is something that has but this is a real working together now, and it's something that we share as a goal, and we're in initial stages of looking the funding that he has in development. It's so early stages, so yeah, we're trying to set that original presentation, the foundation, we're trying to generate make sure that the foundation community is really important partner. Government money is sometimes more challenging for people. The experience that we have always so it's really important to try to
And the resiliency support, like public resiliency support you mentioned, and it said assess property is like another property connect or other fundraising mechanism at the local level that work like that.
and let me be clear, this is not a new requirement, it's at the discretion of how it has the authority not to do. So all of those different tools that the board can use, including budgeting and assessment, is at the discretion of the the board of municipality might set it up, the governance process, they can also accept federal funds. So they could use the grant program, they don't have to. I will say that one of the reasons, and might use assessment or establish a district, is because one thing the federal government will not fund is ongoing operation maintenance of, covered voice project. So that was a much smaller cost often, and capital was spread over time. But it's also often something that it was time to, after a number of years, kind of changing the long haul issues, and there was operating the way it should. Important to have.
In your presentation, you mentioned parity, well, flooding maps and also this moderation vulnerability map. You talk about one of the factors that you all are working on with the city, and two, it's like generally how the city might be one thing about addressing those issues there. And yeah, so the process by which parity emerged as a project that Circle would focus on through this grant that I talked about, which is called Resilient Connecticut. So during there was a phase, this money was basically taking the vulnerability assessment of Fairfield and Dayton counties. And through that vulnerability assessment, we identified places that are vulnerable to flooding across those two counties. There were over 63 specific locations that we identified. And then we went through a process to look at issues like equity and it also had a focus on sort of infrastructure, regional infrastructure, and so we narrowed it down to a series of places that we could focus on, and fairly one of those places. Partly it was engaging with the city, and early on in our engagement with the city, they let us know that they saw the resilience issues of Fairfield as a gap. There's been a lot of attention paid to lawn work and a lot of attention paid to other parts of the city, but they needed, where they were looking for an opportunity to sink into some analysis and work with the Fairfield. So we felt it was a good fit for all those reasons, and so that was sort of our process. So the process of the project itself includes at least 3 public workshops. So the public is going to be involved from the beginning. The first workshop is really meant to be getting the community involved in sort of setting ground rules for what should be priority of the study. And there's also an advisory committee that would be formed. And that is really going to be a broad stakeholder group that oversees the direction of the project and make sure that the technical capacity is focusing on the things that the community wants us to focus on. So that will be the process of the project. We're kicking off the project with the city, and just talking about the schedule and what those workshops are going to happen, what's happening next week. We're working with the city engineering office and the city planning office, and some other folks. So that's what I can say about that.
Thanks. For Dr. Mitchell, you mentioned like those series of like Carolyn questions from I guess it's right that like, are there cities that have developed good planning models looking at like these gaps in reaching communities, but also thinking through these questions of like don't get people until like sort of pouring down on this?
Yes, there have been some communities that have done it, and there's certain projects, for example, also, for example, but we did develop, I worked with Yale students to develop a guide for municipalities on how to do it, how to identify the populations. And suggestions as to which kind of organization and you can reach out to, they can put you in touch with the people in those communities. So again, we developed a list of questions to ask the people. And when we we have a short summary, a 7-page summary, and then we have a full.
Body that, city, TV group, that anyone
Yes, it's the one we built now is that the city would sort of take the lead. But we're lucky working on this coming year for community use for them to city
Thank you very much. Very informative. You know, we do have our city department that are here. We are and I'm working with the department. And as you noted, we do apply for a grant for what, so we're very fortunate to have department heads that are on top of this. And many members here in the schools, there are more helping orchestrate this workshop. I will be opening up testimony to the public, so if there's anyone from the public that would like to speak on the flooding and feeding item that we just heard about. I will be calling names. If you mistakenly put your name for this, that's okay. You don't have to come up, but you're welcome to, because that does happen. There are sign machines in the back as well. So again, thank you. You can take a seat until the public testimony in this item is over. And again, thank you so much for being here. We look forward to having you come back with updates, especially with your team. I'm sure we'll see a lot of you. Thank you very much for all of your work on this.
Thank you.
So for public testimony, I'm Martin. And again, this is for the flood and heating. And once again, I will ask you to state your name and address for the record and use the microphone close to your mouth.
This is what's not. Good evening. My name is Carolyn Martin. I live at 121 Bradford Street. First of all, I want to say, clearly know that I was on staff as a legislature for 30 years. I spent about a quarter of my adult life in public affairs, so I really do appreciate it. And I actually have some good news. There are a number of low-cost and no-cost measures that we can take to address both problems. Railways. We can paint the roads of these buildings. This will reduce the item effect. They also reduce their conditioning bills. And typically, this will pay for itself in 2 to 6 years. And finance, 6-year payback is equivalent to about 12% rate of return. We can also amend the zoning ordinance to encourage green roofs. And we can also reduce the item effect, also reduce stormwater runoff. We can promote possible for the city to look into taxing from the clients, increase property values. That's something right. You take some of the additional property taxes that arise from that, and I provide for planning communities or the basis. In addition, as you all know, there are a large number of private parking lots that are substantially oversized. In some cases, this may actually create global land used for housing or other purposes, and still have a permeable surface which is runoff to the water. And then there's really one of the things that exacerbates flooding is that every year you come down, there are leaves go and block this work. We normally have shooting on set bases. We really don't take into account this, particularly on leaves with sewers. I would focus on the areas that are close to this. This does not necessarily Ocean Reduction Act. One of the things I'm particularly pleased with from that initial resolution is the money in the act for getting the I'm sure that plays a role in the fact that I do think there are a number of relevant steps. Clearly, this is not on this album. But I'm really ready to do something.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We also started your written testimony. One other thing that I forgot to mention is you got a little bit of next up is Chris Schweitzer.
Chris Schweitzer, 361 Elm Street. We're back to that for all this, but I just really want to say, like, this is absolutely crazy. Not that you're looking at this, but climate change is absolutely insane. We're talking about 20 inches of CO2. 20 inches of the ocean, right? A huge part of the planet. The temperature is around the planet today. In China, unprecedented heat wave all summer. Not just in the third country underwater. 1 million homes destroyed. 1,000 people are dead. It has to be huge stories. We know all of this, but predictions that will increase and crazy underbombs that are going on all over the place. I'm not just saying that to like underline good planning resilience, but say like greenhouse gases, that you know, greenhouse gases and greenhouse gases and their resilience is really important. But there's just no way, greenhouse gases, seawalls, whatever else we do is going to make a difference. Secondly, it's one of the climate justice. It's an important to talk about this. But really, climate change is like some rich guy in his house goes out back and like finding fireworks or finding fire. And it's hard to fire in the woods. And all the low-income houses around the rich guy start going up. Well, the best thing to do is the rich guys on 1 acres, and they should have needed to help before letting down us. What a lot of people are doing is spending a lot of money on protecting ourselves. We are the ones who do that. That's part of the time. We are responsible, first and foremost, to stop pouring gasoline in the car and start greenhouse gases. Here in Pakistan, we're not climate change. Everybody in Earth, there's like people in Pakistan, they were eating our climate change. They're the ones
being most of the time. At the same time, they're going to have a more staff, even a lot of people. So we really have to ramp up spending on reducing air pollution and greenhouse gases. So the transportation whole year, it's covered sense, it's great quality of life, air pollution, will make us healthier, so many benefits. So I just really encourage the latter of the dam of water, city funds for that. We found that the greenhouse gas was just away. We're going to do our own disaster. What we would do it soon. It's not a long term thing. It really is. Now.
Eric Mastriani. Reminders, statements, and hazards for the record and the viewers.
Good evening, everyone. Alders. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Eric Mastriani. I live on 155 State Street. I also come to you as a former engineer of the League of Cities, and also part of the recovery and preparedness team over at Wall. I've been through Super 5 Typhoon Mata and a few other natural disasters, held many high credentials for relief and recovery, all the way up to nuclear strikes. We had to, at one time, take over the city as being in charge. But as a concerned resident, lifelong resident of the Cape and an engineer, I look around me and ask questions. When's the last time our sewage drains, our roads were pitched, and other things have been assessed to stop flooding? When I was a county 50, I know, right? 50, here in New Haven, there used to be a sign down along what almost many remember. Used to tell the different levels of flooding if it ever occurred. Right? In New Haven, where it would strike. Now I wonder how many commissions that we could get on and be a part of about this and share our knowledge. Sounds like a lot of questions about or content. But I think of the most vulnerable, our elderly, our disabled, and others. How are we going to address and work with education? And as a Navy CE, we used to work with local authorities to run drills, to see react times, to get the most vulnerable educated and alerted so we can minimize casualties. These are some of the things I've always thought of. Ms. Anna, I mean, you have many chats, and you know these things always been on mind. So when I heard of this opportunity, thanks to Kevin McCarthy, reminded me that this was coming up, I had to be here as a concerned citizen and ask these questions because sometimes they're not thought of, it's hindsight, and it is valuable and valuable. Like I said, education is best. I believe that the city and all, I saw one of the planners, looked like the response gentleman from the fire department, I think, or National Emergency Services. They should work with the engineers of the Army, Corps of Engineers hand in hand, and include them in all these assessments. Very knowledgeable what needs to be done. And look out at some of the outdated things that we could address to stop flooding, more drainage, more pitch on the roads to where it's not standing still, and things like that. These are the things that come to mind. I know they did.
John Cavalier.
John, that we're 827 Roadway Avenue, and we're just planning to board alders. It's very good. It's quite a situation. So I was helping and my neighbors in Westville, I was able to restore also home health. And I'm going to the previous neighbors that were restored beautiful old building. And enclosed ever since 2019. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm doing it restoring March, furniture for people, watching sugar. But then there's a display like me, Alvin Grant, who moved to New Haven. That's right away about Edward B. Shea, who was the first African American Baptist in the country. He's son of New Haven, son of free slaves, and it's a very interesting story. And we saw a portrait at Shoreline Library of B. Shea, and he lives and moved, and still inside. Have a reading at least or some sort of performance with the place. And alas, on the 22nd of August, we had a serious flash flood. And I missed you about the video and I have to email you all. It's on science fiction. So what happens is the storm runoff from the storm, it goes into the basin. Catch basin and sewer system. We can't handle the capacity. So at that point, the manhole covers just pop off. And like kind of, and it's venting. And so I did some research on it, and I found out that this is considered type 2 black water, which is a hazmat because it is basically raw sewage mixed with stormwater. So I'm thinking, people, I don't know how many masks we have on our face, but if we're trudging through sewer water like this, I think it poses a public safety issue. And it doesn't affect just me and my immediate neighbors, it affects all of us, all of the city, all of Connecticut. And this is a clarion call. We need to do something. And I sent a letter. I don't think we have time to read it, but I CC'd the health inspector. Haven't got a response. All the good people, as individuals, I love everybody at City Hall, and I know everyone is busy at the work, your staff, but I need your advice, okay? Perfect time. Thank you.
Thank you. If you're down, again, this is just for the flooding and heat wave. Okay, no worries. Yes, I see that now. We should. Sorry. Aaron Good. Again, this is for the flooding and heat wave vulnerability.
It wasn't letting me listen to one, to one of all the three questions, the funding mechanisms for resiliency projects can also include stormwater. Came up a decade ago, so let's say a cooling draft and that idea was open to Michelle, but I think it came up again. We would have probably community consultation and buy-in. That's one. Number two, the definition of none of us communities is kind of that you would want to convert about that definition of state law. It's very flawed, to the detriment of the state. So that's the definition of various protection. The state law is also not in some of these programs, but unfortunately that present what it is we know we're crossing. We want all of these things. All of this. So this definition does not reflect what is commonly understood by environmental justice. It's tied to this. So this is very, very flawed. And again, environmental justice by the Constitution. Number three, I was going to talk about this later, which is second secret to all, but there is a tremendous amount of money. You know, where another grant programs for climate mitigation projects. And this, I just want to urge the agency, we need to make sure we have the capacity You're doing a great job, staff, that's doing a great job. But we really need to have the staff capacity. The last climate, so we can apply for these grants. We shovel their projects, right? So
That completes the list, but if there's anyone else on the audience that would like to speak on flooding and heat wave vulnerability, please come forward. For a second time, if there's anyone on the public that would like to speak on this item, please come forward. For a third time, if anyone on the public would like to speak on flooding and heat wave vulnerability, please come forward. Okay. Seeing none, thank you for those that did testify. If you have testimony, we have received it. We will now move on to item number 2. Mr. Thompson. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair. All this evening, my name is Rick Montana. 343 Main Street, on the west end. Tonight, we have in front of you the emergency management performance grant. This is a grant that, this is a grant that is part of FEMA. It is pass-through grant, so it originates at FEMA. It's passed through to the state executive department of emergency management homeland security. It measures, it provides funding for the performance of emergency management for all 160 members. It's typically 50 cents per resident based on the annual population. We have been there since 2008. I know that this grant has been in place prior to plus the post 9/11 era. To make sure you're ready, that you have an emergency operation plan, that you have appropriate staffing, and that they fund you accordingly to the population. In previous years, the mayor would sign this grant, and they would sign the grant based on the fact that in the even code of ordinances, chapter 11, section 5, authority of the mayor to cooperate with other governmental units pretty clear, what it allows the mayor to do. The state had said, look, this, was in place in 1950, and then before this was updated in 1989. So they wanted us to like think about updating it to the current kind of post 9/11. So rather than to really very difficult to just change ordinance, so we're bringing this to the mayor specifically that has to then be approved by the law. So it's a little bit different, a little bit more legwork. The amount here is $68,469.45. If the city is prepared and doesn't have a robust plan for planning, preparedness, response, and recovery, then you don't get this fund. You have a pretty robust department. As you know, we really have one. This really funds some time and also supply for equipment as well. I will tell you that we continue as an annual grant. So this will come up every year and it will not come up to dollars for approval and a resolution and then signed and submitted. Once you see the documentation, the state comes to the city. What's that? Financial impact at all? It is just a 100% fund.
Thank you, sir. I will open it up to questions from committee members. Any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Khan, for coming. Madam Chair, I'd like to request the fiscal year 2020 emergency performance grant spending breakdown for the committee's edification.
Do you have that information? Previous grant?
So we have a previous grants, correct? Yeah, I don't have it readily available.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What would you use for what kind of things this would, it says 9%. That's all equipment or?
So it actually is personnel. The way it's been structured for years before I got here, and rather than to break it down in a piece of equipment, it's done as personnel. Personnel, and of course, does cover the entire personnel, like based off of print, hourly rate, and the individual working are working 100% of the time in earnest. Kind of the requirement set forth state level again. This is the tax federal state.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? And is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? If you'd like to speak on this item, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, resolution. The engineer.
Thank you very much. If you could, remind me that I was on there, I was on presentation and I do public safety and they are separate items, however, they are related, purpose.
Absolutely.
There. for. All right, so tonight I'm going to talk to you about Build Downtown Multiple Resiliency projects. These are projects that are many years in the making. A lot of different departments have worked on it, the engineering department, county development, Laura Brown is here from the city planning department. It's a very important planning work at the start, and then also support the chief administrative office. So you heard so much tonight from, truly wonderful people. The state, John and Becky we work closely with, Dr. Mitchell is such an inspiring person in the environmental movement here in Connecticut. And it really is truly, as you declared a couple years ago, finding them. There's sort of two parts to it. There's sort of preventing the climate emergency, and then there's the mitigation. Dealing with the effects that we're seeing. Today we're seeing them, and we'll see them increasing. And as a coastal community, you heard that there's sea level rise, there's more frequent rain events, there's effects of heat. All of these issues really can make conditions very difficult for the haven, and we have to start planning for those now and start implementing ways to mitigate and protect against these harmful effects. So these two diagrams you've probably seen many times. I actually drew them before I was a city engineer, so at least 2013. It really looks at the resiliency challenges that we have in the downtown North area. We have storm surge coming in from the harbor. We have upland rain events that drain down to the harbor. And when those two things happen at the same time, you end up having flooding in the areas that are caught in the middle. Right? The Union Avenue, the 34th corridor, Temple and George, a lot of these areas that you see down by IKEA that flood routinely and interrupt some of the most important, healthcare areas of the city, transportation corridors, and truly have a large impact. So at the time, we all sat down and tried to come up with an overarching strategy of how to protect the haven in the future from these sorts of events. And we took the green first strategy, developing green stormwater infrastructure to reduce the amount of rain when stormwater gets into our drainage system. To the other techniques that we looked at and started planning for was increasing the capacity of drainage out to the harbor. And also making the drainage more resilient to storm surge, and then also protecting a long march against storm surge. So after we talk about our green stormwater infrastructure, 286 class wells in the county. This is starting from the spring, calculate that down. We're roughly capturing about 1% of the city's impervious surface, and that's for public and private property, which is quite frankly a pretty large achievement. I think the capital basis is ranked quite highly in the United States for green stormwater infrastructure and public right of way, and it's something that's worked. We've seen the U.S. School of the Environment, CLICGAC, and others study our bioswales and concluding that they are providing benefits. So it's not just something that we think is working, but something that's been proven in the data. So you've seen that. So that was element number one. And when we look at these areas of the city and what we're trying to protect, there's so many things we can talk about. This is obviously a slide from our One More Responsible Growth Plan. There's downtown, there's the hill of downtown area, people's homes, transportation corridors, places where people work, where they gather, where they go to recreate. There's places that New England residents can support their families. You know, tax revenue, square footage development, and looking at, the big unionization process that's happening right now. How do we protect the front door of the station and the connections that it brings to our city? So much of our environmental burden is due to the transportation corridors that come through it. These corridors will be protected, right? If we let the state and the feds figure out how to protect these corridors of national importance long term, and they may ignore some of the other parts of the city in between and around it. So we really wanted to get ahead of that and make sure that any of the resilient solutions for New England not only protect these very important national assets, but also protect New England's ability to grow and provide opportunity based on its proximity to these transportation assets that do present also an environmental burden. All right, so just going back, so we talked about how sort of the green loop, green infrastructure part we've seen already out in the street, constructed. Now tonight we're going to focus on these two elements here, increasing the drainage capacity and protecting the long water. So there are two separate projects that I'll talk to you tonight. The first is an Army Corps of Engineer project, which we are along with the state of Connecticut, the local sponsor. This project has three main elements to it. The first is a flood wall, stretching from almost City Point all the way to right near the I-95 interchange. The second are roadway gates, 5 sets of roadway gates. 3 of them close off the underpasses under I-95. 2 of them provide a little more height to I-95, right across the entrance of the entrance exit of 95 on Baltimore. And then the third is the pump station. Once you sort of close off this area from the water, rainwater and other things can't get out of this area. So this is to make sure that even while you're preventing storm surge, you're not simply causing the flood you just saw. So those all work together in the Army Corps project. The second project is the FEMA BRIC project. BRIC is building resilient infrastructure in communities. It's actually one of the grant programs that Rebecca Stern spoke about earlier. And that has the elements in blue. It's a 10-foot stormwater tunnel from roughly the police station out to the harbor. And then an outfall structure at the harbor to get the water out of the stormwater tunnel at the harbor. So both are related projects. They both have separate utilities, meaning that if you build one and not the other, the project will work. But they also work very closely together to provide larger benefits that either one will be utilized separately. All right, so to give you a little more of a sense and a 3D perspective of what we're looking at, this is the police station up here. So we start tunneling underground, 45 feet underground, down alongside the highway, through what we affectionately call the Taco Bell site. I don't remember the history of it, but this piece of land here, right by Brewery Street, and then out to the new outfall structure, which is right here between the Vienna restaurant and the boathouse. The Army Corps project would construct a flood wall, which you see here with the gate across Canal Drive, and finishing up into this, turning into this embankment over here. And this is the pump station, the vast majority of which is underground, kind of like an iceberg. And that would then tie into as well as the outfall structure. So the two colors kind of give you a separation of the two different projects and right one thing I would want to note is that all the water that comes out of this outfall is actually coming out right here, right now, and then another outfall slightly further down Baltimore. So none of the water is diverted from somewhere else. It's just going to come out faster so that it doesn't flood further up. Right. So the Army Corps of Engineers project, this is their official slide from their official project description. The flood wall, as we discussed before, along I-95, the flood wall is up to an elevation of 15, which means that it varies in height above the ground, about 7 or 8 feet, but probably about 1 or 2 feet. So it's not a particularly tall wall, but it does provide a significant amount of protection to the lower areas behind it. And it's spread along the highway so that Long Wharf Drive still continues to be Long Wharf Drive, a place where it was 999 days out of 1,000. We don't have a horrible storm event going on. You can access the water and build food trucks and all of that. These are the 5 gates along the Long Wharf area to protect water from being able to circle around and get through around the wall. And then the pump station is actually over here at this point. The process is this is an earlier one, but they have 2 pump stations now at this point right here. And it's about it's 1,134 cubic feet per second. That's a lot of mental math, but it's like 8,000 or 9,000 gallons a second. So it's quite fast. It'll rotate very fast. So that's that. So a little bit about how this is funded. Some of you may remember that in January, our absolutely wonderful representative, Lauro, announced $160 million of funding for this project. The overall cost of the project in the Army Corps report is $151.3 million. It is it comes to $160 million is coming out of Hurricane Ida funding. There are 2 parts to this project. The first is the design phase, which is what is before you tonight for approval. That has a design cost that is projected by the Army Corps of $9.67 million. 3.38 million of that, 35%, is the responsibility of the local sponsors. The state and the city have agreed to split the cost 50-50. So that would put us at the hook for just under 1.7 million. Our match is actually going to include services that we directly contract with, since with some Hurricane Sandy money, we've actually done a preliminary design of the pump station. So our contribution will be paying to continue the design of the pump station on behalf of the Army Corps, up to 1.69 million. We're going to use capital funds that we have allocated from engineering and economic development, and we're working closely with management and budget on all of that. We're looking to sign the agreement as soon as the 3rd quarter of 2022, and the state and the Army Corps is the part of the agreement, so that design work can start from 2022 to 2024, and then go into the construction phase of 2025 to 2028. Construction cost is $141.6 million at this point. Construction cost, the construction phase will come back to the Board of Aldermen. In a very interesting quirk, even though the project is more than fully funded with federal dollars, the Army Corps maintains that there still is a 65-35 split between the federal government and the local partners due to the language in the legislation. So we work closely with them and also our delegation. Once we are ready to go to construction, our delegation is confident that they can change some of the enabling legislation language to slot us into 100% construction funding, and we would be able to take the dollar, use the dollars that have already been allocated for construction. But I'll be very, very clear with you that this is still a question that we're working on and will work on until the completion of the design. So we look to transfer the project into 100% fully funded federal funding status in the future fiscal year. And then the final, in the future, the maintenance of the project is divided between the city and the state. We have preliminary discussion with the state on that. We'll have a lot more to say about it as we start to go through the design. All right. So that was project number 1. Project number 2 is a FEMA Building Resiliency Construction Community
grant program nationally. And this is to build a 10-foot micro tunnel, stormwater tunnel from essentially 1 Union Avenue, as well as across like Wall Street, or 1 Union, all the way to the harbor. Because of the active northeast corridor, we have to stay at least 2.5 pipe diameters below the tracks, which makes us go about 45 feet below. And there's a lot of structures out there, so it's a huge amount of time the ground penetrating radar and geotechnical work to make sure that alignment for the pipe is built. The key thing to remember about this pipe is that it will operate on the gravity flow now, even if the Army-Corps project is not yet constructed. And then also the future pump station would not only more or less double the capacity of the pipe, but also allow it to operate in times when there's a storm surge and the level of the water in the harbor is higher than the level of the wall of the land, where that return of the trade. We'll see that in a little bit. We don't come up with 10-foot tunnels that are over 3,000 feet long out of nowhere. We spent years doing a lot of mathematical modeling with our consultant, CBM Smith, paid for out of grant funds we got after Hurricane Sandy. Modeling the 835 acre downtown hill and Longmore Slum Sewershed. There's 2 outfalls. There's actually a ring in the pipe. It's an extremely complicated system. God bless the people that can figure out how to do all that modeling. It's a very niche kind of thing. But we also do flow metering, where we put in sensors and points to the network to understand what happens during a certain rain event. And also storm observation. That's our model, so that we have flooding, put the rainfall data in the model, and see if it's related to the sort of flooding that we have. So that's all the physical observations and calibrate and then the fun part is to draw pipes and see which pipes to draw that help solve it. Very important, but that's good. All right. So to give you a sense of what this looks like, a section view, right? So this is pretend this is Union Avenue in downtown. Over here we have our traditional drainage system. Water flows downhill. It gets to our new tunnel system, so it will drop down very far in a very tall manhole. Might be a pretty spectacular waterfall there. And then you'll about at 45 feet, so the bottom of the pipe is at 45 feet below the ground. It'll go under the rail tracks for 3,000 feet out to the harbor, at which point the water comes back up the outfall structure and pours out to the harbor. Now, without a pump station, the water will still flow through what's called an inverted siphon, because the water level on this side is a little bit higher than the water level on this side. So the water will go down, flow back up, and out. However, if you get our existing 100-year storm surge, we've got an elevation of 11.5, and 2070, we're looking at another 2.5 feet on top of that. That's above the land. So if the water is all the way up here, the tide gates on the outfall structure will close, but none of the rainfall up here will be able to get at. And that's why a pump station is very valuable. So what the pump station does is that it taps into the tunnel and a couple of other pumps in the area, and pumps the water up all the way to an elevation of 18. And then the water sort of spills out the top of the pipes that have the pump at the bottom into a discharge channel that then goes back out and out the outfall structure. So the pump station allows us the water to flow faster up here into the tunnel, and then also pushes it higher so that it can get above the level of a 27 storm surge and still flow out and drain this area, even if the level of the harbor is higher. All right. So another element of the BREAK project, and actually where we're getting a significant amount of match from, is our Living Shoreline project that is state funded for World War. And this is using natural features like planting marsh and beach nourishment and other plantings to naturally provide protection against erosion. So we have a layered approach to flood protection. Along the margin here, it's erosion protection. There's a lot of important utilities, including a force main and 115 kilovolt transmission line in Long Wharf Drive. So we really want to make sure that those assets don't get eroded. However, it can flood, and then the water will come back off of Long Wharf Drive, and then it hits the flood wall on the backside of the highway. Now that the water can get further into the assets that we have to protect. So that's an important part of this as well. All right, so how is this all funded? The overall cost of the tunnel and the living shoreline is $35.5 million. It's a 70% federal, 30% local grant. Our local share is part of the three buckets. One of them is, as I said before, our living shoreline grant from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. We also have some money from the local transportation capital improvement program, and then also some $1 million of local bond funds that we have. So the status of this is right now, we're actually a sub-grantee to the state of Connecticut. A big thank you to the state of Connecticut. They really worked hard with us. They actually hired a consultant to work hard with us on our application for FEMA grant. And it was their application, we were a sub-grantee. And we're right now in the pre-award process where we've gotten through the national competitive selection, which is a really big deal. And we've been selected for further scrutiny. And so that will take a few months. We conduct an in-depth review of our project and make sure there aren't any fundamental flaws to funding. Once we're funded, there's a two-step process. The first is we have to complete the design. We're at 30% design right now, using the funds we received after Hurricane Sandy. So in 23 and 24, we'll complete the design. After phase one, FEMA evaluates to make sure that the design is still cost-effective. There's this extremely complicated benefit cost analysis that you have to do for FEMA projects. I won't push it on anyone. So at that point, we make a final determination to proceed, at which point we head to bidding and construction. All right. So to summarize, what do we get from these two projects? We get stormwater protection, stormwater flood protection for the Hill downtown area. So a lot of the hot button places we see flooding in Hill downtown. We get coastal and flood protection for Long Wharf and vital infrastructure. And we get a resiliency for what we think is a minimum of 60 to 80 years. What does it cost? It's $187.2 million right now for the full cost of these projects. 173 million federal, 11.5 million from the state, and 2.7 million in local bonds. You will notice the asterisk, and I want to be very clear about that. This assumes, which we believe will happen, is that we're able to fix the federal legislative language so that the money that has been allocated by the federal government, it's there, will be able to be applied fully to construction. And I want to be very, very clear that this is contingent on that. We think it is very, but in the interest of full transparency, we'll make sure that that makes sense. And we're looking for 3 to 4 years. So with that, I hope I know that was a lot of that.
You know what I always appreciate about you is bringing to our level. So I'm happy. I think I understood most of it. I do have a question about the runoff though. What happens in that pump station? Because there's the rainwater that comes in and it's probably polluted.
So it's the rainwater goes back into the piping system of the river. Pump station. It is all rainwater that we come out, 150 feet to the south.
I guess I was more geared towards the filtration that's underneath.
I mean, there's
The bottom of the pump station actually can act as a settlement chamber. You know, it's most of the fluids in stormwater are the ones, you know, the separated stormwater system. One of the things the new stormwater structure helps with is dealing with that first flush. Water right, you can go in with broken down fire. So there's water quality and water quality benefits to the new stormwater. Once you get into the system, you know, there is a bit of that at the bottom or pump station, especially for that. But yes, they're very high.
Regarding the language and when will we know?
So we worked with both the Senate and the direct time to justice is right before the time. So you get to the end of July, the Army Corps changes the designation of project of construction, at which point it's very difficult and would be under the current legislation, 100% of the funds.
Okay, so we have some time, someone is working on it, so someone on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something that is very much happening.
And where have the type of design been implemented?
I mean, it's a fairly typical design. Microtunnelling is actually not part of the entire project. There are a couple of the state line, for the largest the design we have right now is doing large island. Very common down, but instead of build shaft that is about 1,000 feet, and if you send a filling machine to the tunnel, the tunnel through, it actually grabs the pipeline. And you very well realize that. Sorry.
Okay, so I appreciate that. I'll go tonight. All around one.
Madam Chair. Thank you, for all of this information. I just have one question. Is there any effect on the moonlight with the waters coming?
No, I don't think there is. It's in the middle of a storm event. There's a lot of water around. I think the overarching plan is, you know, regional structure. And one of the things that, you know, I mentioned in part, some of the others, floodwaters are not clean. So stormwater is much cleaner if it's able to flood it and then goes back out. And dirt, through, from, ground, it really is not similar to the water that's going out. We're also doing our best to make sure that this is a separate system. The south also part of the line, so we can but this really so
You actually answered much more of what I thought. really appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for all your. But as far as I conclude, what would be the operation cost annually for the full cap? So I think we're still trying to work on that, design on a lot of that. Work with the state, some of the maintenance, those walls, those all. That's the part. There is going to be an maintenance to this, about it. Personally, however, this is incredibly important. Probably more. And so it's, yeah, there are costs. Thank you.
What we think about the solar panel
I think I love solar panels. Yeah, I think I want to build, we'll start looking at the, I don't think there's a lot of area associated with it, the long-term infrastructure, that's all the solar panels. Without that significant impact, no pump station.
or even others. And questions? Thanks for the presentation. And so we're going back to the wall.
So the wall really will, it's kind of interesting, because the wall is a high wall. So kind of almost seem like one of the walls. All four of the wall, the wall will be there, and the slope will be up on the top of the wall. The wall does line protection to the make sure so it's, we looked at a lot of different variations of where this wall would go. One of the things we looked at was having the wall between the wall and the water. Higher back on the north area, on the base of storming. But this, I think, will have a fairly minimal, impact. It'll just seem like the town hall. Hope that will look at that part, but it'll be between sort of back to it'll be only about 7 or 8 tall maximum for all of the at least the part.
What's the moment?
I would suspect concrete, probably would be that. No, I mean, the wall sort of returns back into the top. So, you know, decline, visible height, sort of. So you have the wall.
It looks like one of the gates is away.
So, yeah, you can have water actually head down water. And then go under the.
And so that is the line of question on this. I'm sort of confused. When you gave a presentation, it sounds like but it sounds like so they would actually have to amend federal legislation in order for us to.
They, I got a rule or federal legislation. So, they would have to get this product.
Okay. So like they would be designated for the construction.
And because it doesn't already have necessary dollars. To move around.
Okay. And that would that.
Yeah, that would happen.
So. And do you have a sense for this initial 1.6 million, which chapter was?
So I have a one version line at my part of the. Also, obviously, reserve funds, that's not a lot. So,
It was a microtunnel using like only 6 million in the last funding. In fact, I feel like I think last like roadway.
yeah. So it's also to deal with, I agree, problems, flooding on streets.
And then the last question, with like issues with like combined sewer overflow, does this affect the separation system at all? Is there any advantage or disadvantage there in terms of like ultimately having separate systems?
It definitely would hurt that. It does help. There are moments when the flows of the two systems interact. Sometimes, usually, eventually, same flows into the storm system. Flow. There are times. But this is obviously. But what this would also prevent is how we stewards flow.
Further questions? At this time, I will open it up to the public. If there's anyone on the public that would like to speak on this item, please come forward. Anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? Is anyone on the public that would like to speak on this item, please come forward. Seeing no one, we can move on to item number 5. While we're setting up our item number 5, I'm going to assume the public is here for this item, and if anyone does want to sign up, there is a line sheet. For those who missed me here, also, you have submitted public testimony. We did receive a bunch of emails, and they are appreciated. If you have submitted public testimony, and wish to also speak on your testimony, if you could summarize what you mentioned in the email, that would be appreciated. And again, there will be a 3-minute limit for testimony. Thank you all for your patience. It's greatly appreciated. We have a long meeting tonight, but as we can see, it's very important information as well as items that will affect all of us in the city, and important items too. Okay, so name and address for the record and proceed with your presentation.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members. Thank you for the presentation. Last people, so last year. My name is Steve Garcia. I'm the presentation from the practice of property by after street. I'm here probably with the job. This is the operation.
Okay, so just speak right into it. Don't push any buttons or you'll turn it off. Okay, and just be very close, put the microphone close to your mouth, so everyone can hear, even during the presentation. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. That's all the questions. This is the we are requesting your approval to apply as secretary. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the federal opportunity federal grant. So with the grant and this is a federal opportunity focused exclusively on transportation. But there are some state benefits here that we also so this is the federal project, federal grant that actually for projects that are used to monitoring system control and reducing debt or eliminating debt or so this is a $1 billion grant for an actual control, but it's a 5-year, $1 billion to the end of the 5 years. So there will be one existing piece of special grant for all the with 15 federal grants, either or funding, as I mentioned earlier, is $1 for all the projects. The minimum, all there is a minimum maximum. One of the things that is on the guidelines is so the minimum one is around $5 million, up to $1 million, especially for new housing. And if it is a joint application with multiple jurisdictions, amount there is a kind of example you always see this like all over the city. These crosswalks intersections, code grounds, and countdowns. accessibility levels in future. Now, around transit, there are a bunch of improvements, but some of them are related to our living study that actually, the first phase is completed already, so now it's completed recently. But now we are to move into environment implementation. So one of the recommendations of the plan was to use that study again, leverage to make improvement along the bus transport. There's also recommendations to add dedicated bus lanes and transport materials in other routes. So what that means is that I take from you actually have buses that are priority to get in and all the So for the other recommendations, if you do bus stop improvements, which is where I was talking about improving the bus shelter, bus sheeting, but also making some transit improvements which are tactical, which are critical to products, and which are easy to do. You can actually test them out, get some positive feedback, and also to sort of understand the lessons learned. Around bikes, one of the key things is obviously having more bike lanes, but also to look at parking, from a dynamic curve use point. And this is where all the first time we'll talk about it. So, and this is one of those, facilities that's all over the country right now. So it's not only used for these kind of products, bicycle products too, but it's also used for using curb space around businesses or curb space dynamically around bus corridors. The second thing is obviously adding improvements to or making our signals more, improving our signals so that bicycles actually have, they don't have to stop a lot more features for them to move to the system. The third one was extending our network, connecting with east-west and north-south so that you can actually, you have a way to do your cross-city, going from one end to another. And obviously the fourth one, which is very key, is related to the first one, which is having protected roads or all sorts of bike lane infrastructure around critical land uses like parks, schools, churches, where there's a lot of, activity that's going on. Oh, and that's all I have. I have a bunch of other slides. I just want to skip through it in the interest of time. But a lot of that stuff is really cool. And I'll share some additional slides. I'm happy to talk about things. And these are some concepts that we developed. So I'll share them.
Right. Plan. For the grant. And I know that there is a time limit to all of this, which means we as a committee would have to discharge this tonight. We will not take a vote on it, started to the full board of alders in order to time. I will ask the committee members if you have any questions regarding the plan, the grant, any concerns. So the plan itself, though, doesn't have its design to exist. Is that correct?
So one thing I forgot to make it clear, the plan has some high-level goals around walking transit and recommendations around. But the plan also has some policy-related recommendations around improving our operations or our responses around education, engineering. But there's a third one here, which is the plan also identified, because we did a needs assessment, not only around, the condition of all the transportation infrastructure out there, like sidewalk ramps, intersections, but we also did a needs analysis around the using crashes as one of the critical, data sources here. So in the appendix of the plan, there's actually a list of number of projects that have been identified for improvements. That will change as we go because the data changes, and we'll probably, as we go through this process in the next few years, we'll be adding more projects. But at a starting point, there's a number of projects in each of the wards, and not just the 7 priority neighborhoods. So it's in every neighborhood. So those are the projects that we're going to use to go after the funding.
And now, what we didn't have in the past that we have now is data supporting some of these initiatives that you're looking to implement. And I mean, this is a program that we've been working on for a long time. Is there a peer group too that did some work for us or continues to work with us?
So yes, so we have some wonderful partners here. We have obviously we work with CARE, is one of our major partners here. Yale has been a good partner. They've given us some suggestions, and we made sure that some of their recommendations are included in the plan. We worked with the engineering team on this thing. So it was not just an internal city technical team that was working on these things. It was a city, based on public outreach. We got a lot of input. We worked with advocacy groups, the Safe Streets Coalition and NHCAT. So we've got some wonderful partners who provided a lot of good input, and we used that to sort of essentially update the plan. Because when I started in December, the plan was still, under work. And when it came to June, we basically decided to sort of make some of the recommendations much lighter.
Now, this grant opportunity didn't come to your attention until June, July, which is a tight squeeze because it's due on September 15th.
So yeah, I just looked through. So originally when the grant came, when the announcement was made, it was early May. But the notice of funding opportunity didn't come until the last week of May. And at that point, our plan was still being, worked through. And we looked at the notice of funding opportunity, and we decided the plan still needed some changes to be made, especially around racial equity impact assessment, which is one of the critical requirements. And we made those changes in the next couple of weeks and decided to wrap up the plan by 3rd week of June. And then we decided to, put it as the protocol agenda in July.
So it came before the board as a communication, and I guess we have an opportunity, is my understanding, that we are one of the few municipalities that actually has a plan in place, or somewhat of a plan, because obviously plans change, they can be amended. So even though we're going to be discharging this, if the full board votes to support this, amendments can be made to the plan itself.
Yes. So the plan is always a living document because the plan and the projects are always living document. Let's kind of remember that. So to your earlier point about whether we are the only municipalities, from my intel, please, we are the only municipality who actually have an action plan like this. So when this project was started in 2019, we were not foreseeing any transportation funding coming in 2022, especially around projects that focus on not only safe systems approach, Vision Zero, and equity, all 3 major components, of transportation, any sort of transportation improvements. So we are the only, as far as I know, we are the only municipality in the entire state that has an action plan. I know Middletown is kind of exploring to go after some funding for implementing projects. So I didn't make it clear, one of the things is the plan, the Safe Streets for All grant provides funding for municipalities and NPOs or like SCROG or Council of Governments in Connecticut to develop a plan, or they give you funding if you have an actionable plan to go after implementation. They still give you some additional supplemental grants to kind of tighten up your action plan, but that can be requested as part of the implementation grant. So what we are going after is implementing this plan. But the key requirement here is it needs to be actual approved, adopted plan in place, so that the federal government can actually say, hey, you guys have an adopted plan, we should do that.
So the ask for the full board of alders is to vote for the plan in order for you to apply for the grants and have the opportunity, because there might not be as many applicants that could exist next year.
So I read through all the documentation on the NOFO, and as far as I know, for implementation, they are looking, again, this is very high level number, but their thinking is around 100 grants for implementation. Because in the first round, they've anticipated that a lot of municipalities are not ready with an action plan. So they expect a lot more requests to develop an action plan in this financial year. But starting next year, or in a year or two, you'll probably see a lot of funding requests for the implementation. And we are, I think, I would say at least a year ahead of everybody.
Not good news, but we're ahead. So fingers crossed that once we apply, we actually get the grants and be able to implement it. And if we do receive this grant, there will be additional community needs, et cetera.
Yes, so that is a great point. So just passing the plan and accepting funding does not mean that we are not going to do any additional public outreach. The design needs to be fleshed out because there are some aspirational elements in the plan, like especially around tripling the number of bike lanes. But again, that's based on a very high level feasibility analysis done by our consultant. But when you go into design, understanding those constraints and understanding what the public wants, especially what the residents want, is going to be very interesting, very important, especially in specific ones.
And do you know the time frame of
The whole process.
So at this point, we don't know because we haven't really, received the funding. But from
But
the funding.
application to actually.
So the application is going to go in September 15th. I don't know when they will make a decision, but from my understanding, reading all the documentation, is once the municipalities have been informed, no later than 12 months, if possible, of course, that grant agreement will be signed.
Oh, so it's a lot.
So within a year that after they make the award, that we'll probably have a grant agreement.
Yeah, so we won't know before a year is up, or we'll know.
I don't know when they plan to announce who the grantees are at this point. I will again, don't quote me here, but I would guess sometime in spring that will know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any questions? Well, thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. I know a lot of work has gone into this. Yes, thank you for your patience. At this time, we'll open it up to public testimony. So I have McCurdy, you seem to be first on the list for both. Come on up, and again, I will remind the audience to state your name and address for the record, and then proceed to your testimony. And after Kevin is probably and then Max.
paper for the application for the grant and the plan. I'll touch briefly on one thing that's covered in the plan, one thing that's not. One thing the plan encourages is where appropriate converting one-way streets to two-way. One of the few things that we can all agree on is the city's one-way system is crazy. And conversion has a number of benefits, including reducing vehicle speed and reducing cyclists going the wrong way on the streets. The city is moving forward on converting some of the streets downtown. That's complicated and costs serious money. There are a wide number of opportunities to convert streets outside of downtown where it really isn't going to be that expensive. Your concerns, I know that number to convert to two-way without losing parking. And also have more than enough room for emergency vehicles to get through. I think whether or not we get the grant, that's something the city should be doing. One point which I believe is not covered in the plan, but it's fairly simple, is that many of the intersections in towns don't have street signs. And putting up street signs, I think, would benefit drivers and cyclists and pedestrians, and it's simple, and again, it should be done. Very much.
Hello. Oh, you said very close. Okay. Hi, my name is Friday. I live in Pearl Street. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'll be very brief. It's a long evening. I'm a member of the Safe Streets Coalition. The chair of my emergency task force meeting have been involved in giving input and canvassing and supporting this plan from the very beginning. I just think it's really, really important for transportation across the city, but making sure we can achieve our emergency goals. We have 8 years, almost 7, to reduce our community emissions to zero, our emergency goals, and it's going to be a really big step towards that.
Thank you.
Following that is Brian Mitchell, and then we are.
Good evening. My name is Matt Shelley here, with the Waters at Foster Street. So I think for a lot about bigger ways in which this plan will address climate inefficiencies and economic efficiencies, but the traffic violence inefficiencies, I think, remain much less visible. I don't just name the names of everyone in New Haven who was killed in 2020, since they aren't here and they cannot speak to that. It's very easy to forget them. Arthur Lasta, Kevin and Anthony Cunningham, Gilberto Molina, Clotilde Candel, Anthony Little, Julio Ruiz, Miles Williams, Eric Joseph Echelonis, Celeste Staten, and Chris Kianpoulin, as well as one person who's not identified. That was 1 year. All people who lived in New Haven who are now dead because of the way that we design our streets. Every single life that was lost was highly preventable accidents. These were the way that we designed our streets, and this happen every single month. So I think the urgency is extremely strong. I'm glad that this happened quickly. I know there's concerns from a state point of view, but I think that the master plan is approved and put forward the better. And I'm very, very glad that there's funding. I think that we heard this is the first citywide plan, but there's been something like 17 other transportation plans before it. A plan is only as good as implementation, and so seeing there's now money behind it, and that we can actually see changes in the way our streets are laid out is huge. So I hope that we feel the urgency that I feel, and we don't forget that many people, it is already too late for them, and the longer we wait, the more lives we'll lose, the more people who are injured, and the more we'll lose. The human lives are also in traffic. So it is very important, not just for climate issues, but for
And
Thank you.
My name's Sarah Mitchell. I'm a Italian foster student. Don't have me. I'm here tonight as a resident of New Haven who walks, bikes, and buses around town. And I think this plan speaks for itself. We've heard so many reasons tonight why to support it and why to accept grant funding. In the interest of time, I am here just to echo the statements of previous testifiers and also know that we lost some people along the way. And I think there would be even more people testifying to past 90 of them. Thank you so much.
I know, thanks for your patience, everyone.
Okay, next is Leor Trustman. Following Leor is Rob Rock and then Abby Rock. Oh, Abby.
Good evening. My name is Leor Trustman, and I live at 396 Orange Street. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak, and I apologize that my answer is a little longer than folks that just came before me. I'm here with the Safe Streets Coalition of New Haven, which is a diverse citywide group of pedestrians, cyclists, public transit riders, and drivers who advocate for just, safe, accessible, and sustainable transportation in New Haven, focusing on underserved communities first. I want to thank the city for contracting with CARE and street plans for CARE, and thank them for their work making this possible, and then the city's rapid work to get this plan in front of the wall. So soon, the Safe Streets Coalition is excited at the prospect of the Board of Alders committing to safety, jobs, environmental justice, quality affordable housing, economic development, and health equity for all residents of New Haven. We move with a comprehensive street plan that prioritizes vulnerable users and equitable mobility. It is essential to advance all of these goals. In New Haven, 1 in 4 families do not own a car. In White, Dixwell, Hill, and West Side neighborhoods, nearly half of households do not have a car, relying on walking, biking, and public transit to access employment and education. And so all of those folks, nearly half of the folks in those neighborhoods, rely on our frankly embarrassing walking, biking, and public transit infrastructure to access the services that they need, including their jobs. Because over 60% of our city jobs are not accessible by public transit, transportation remains one of the biggest barriers to employment for residents in New Haven. Getting to work, to get food, and to the doctor is so much harder than it needs to be. Our beloved city is built for people who can afford cars, civic people driving in on highways from other towns, and that is suffocating so many families who live in New Haven. As Max mentioned, skilling pedestrians and cyclists predominantly older folks of color. To address these inequitable mobility burdens, we need a citywide plan that tries to correct these racist and exclusionary. Next, our current transportation system inequitably pollutes and places an unnecessary barrier to healthcare on low-income folks. It usually varies to asthma and New Haven are one common example of ways in which certain areas carry the overall burden of our dependent transportation system. Compounding this transportation insecurity is a leading barrier to accessing healthcare nationwide. In our city, almost half of those who can't afford a car currently only use a way of getting around, or having this medical appointment because of inadequate transportation. Safe routes for all prioritizes walking, biking, and equitable public transportation to reduce emissions and improve access to healthcare for all. To add to this, a dozen studies have shown that businesses prosper and it's easier to get to them by bike, by bus, and by walking. People in cars are going too fast to stop at a distance. This is their destination. And in the city, people don't want to look for parking. Improving our bus and bike infrastructure is economic development. We heard extensively about the effects on climate change. We heard hopefully we're getting $165 million towards addressing the consequences, we need to work on mitigating that, that course coming to. So thank you for your time, and I hope that we can agree with some of your students.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good math class. Hi, I'm Rob Rock at 3 North Bank Street. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. It is strange to be here, I have to say. It's nice and strange. I haven't been here in 2 years, so thanks for the opportunity. Really, I just want to support everything that everyone before me has said. I'm a really strong booster for Safe Routes for All, and specifically for this funding opportunity. I thought maybe I'd just tell you a little bit about one example of something that I think this could help. That's very close to my neighborhood. I live a block away from Wilbur Cross High School. School just started. Mitchell Drive is the drive that goes from a traffic light on Willow Street to a traffic light on Orange Street. There's no traffic calming infrastructure between those two places. There's 3 small streets, mine being one of them, that crosses theoretically Mitchell Drive to get to the school. Terrible crosswalk. There's 1 striped crosswalk. The rest of the streets aren't striped. Just a great example of where I hope Safe Routes for All would make that a much more pleasant experience. It is currently not a safe route for all. So thanks. I really encourage you to get behind this.
Thank you.
I'm Avondale, 42 Lincoln Street, and thank you all for staying late to listen to this. It's really important. And I strongly support supporting the mayor applying and accepting the funding from the IIJA opportunity and inconsistent with the Safe Routes for All citywide active transportation plan. Safe Routes for All, the plan will improve the ability of people walking, riding a bike, or taking a bus to safely get around New Haven in neighborhoods across the city, and importantly, will connect those neighborhoods. As we've heard, there's been far too many traffic-related deaths and crashes in our city over the past few years. Improving infrastructure plays a critical role in reducing these needless deaths and injuries. And it also does a lot of other things, as other people have said. 38% of transportation is Connecticut's largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions. This plan importantly will help reduce greenhouse gases, which is critical for to avoid the climate catastrophe we've heard so much about tonight. Safe Routes for All will connect people to jobs and schools, providing economic and educational opportunities. It helps economic development by making New Haven a more desirable place to live and work, and making it easier to get to retail locations. It improves health, for example, by enabling people to exercise and reducing emissions, which worsens asthma rates. Moreover, in New Haven, as Leora said, almost half of those who are transportation insecure reported having missed a medical appointment because of inadequate transportation. That's unacceptable. In New Haven, as we've also heard, 1 in 4 families don't own a car and have to rely on walking, biking, or public transport, which are considerably underfunded compared to highways, leading to our significant infrastructure gaps for pedestrians, cyclists, and public transit users. As someone who does not drive, I experience the impact of this underfunding every day, like so many others do. I'm grateful for everyone in neighborhoods across the city who joined CARE and street plans over the past few years to walk and bike around neighborhoods and identify, the most concerning infrastructure gaps. Feedback from residents who navigate our streets every day informed of the proposals in this plan. People citywide want safer streets. Finally, New Haven has come up with traffic safety infrastructure plans in the past, frustratingly, which have not gotten implemented. This time can be different if the city supports Safe Routes for All and applies for the federal funding under the IIJA that's before us. We should seize this opportunity and make our streets safer. Thank you for considering my remarks.
Good to see you. Alicia Santilli is next, and then Neil Linsky following Alicia. then Aaron Good, and Tristan Lawrence. So we'll take Alicia still here.
Everyone. Thanks for sticking with us, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alicia Residentially, I live at 235 Woodward Avenue in Haven, and I'm the director of the Community Alliance for Research and Engagement Care at Southern Connecticut State University and the School of Health. So I strongly support the Safe Routes for All plan and strongly support authorizing the mayor to apply for funding and accept funding. The Safe Routes for All plan is an equitable blueprint for improving infrastructure to support active transportation throughout the city, so that people can more easily walk, bike, and take the bus in and around. In 2019, CARE received funding from the CDC, a REACH grant, Racial and Ethnic Approaches to Community Health, which focuses on chronic disease prevention and most impacted by health disparities. One of the main strategies that we've been working on is active transportation policy at the municipal level, supporting the Safe Routes for All plan development. Our ultimate goal is to create communities where it's easy for people to get exercise in their everyday goings on in order to prevent chronic disease. So at the time that we applied for the grant, we had already been engaged with the Traffic and Transportation Department and even on a variety of initiatives to hopefully improve walkability and bikeability. And this funding source allowed CARE to further our partnership with Transportation Department. It supported CARE staff time and also provided funding to develop Safe Routes, to develop Safe Routes development. And so folks who have spoken previously have already highlighted many of the important issues. I want to take some time today to really emphasize the community engagement that took place over the past several years. So CARE has been helping to lead the city and soliciting community input into the plan. Of course, there have been some interruptions due to COVID-19, but however, we've still been diligently working on the plan and soliciting community input. We've been particularly focused on making sure that low-income communities and Black and Brown communities have had a voice in this plan, because this type of infrastructure is not always prioritized in those communities. Prior to the pandemic, we had hosted several community workshops and meetings with well over 100 people. And then after the pandemic started, over the past 18 months, we've reinvigorated our community engagement around the active transportation plan. We've organized a steering committee made up of 26 individuals to provide direction to the project team, provide input into the plan. We hosted this was together with the Transportation Department. We hosted 4 public workshops with over 80 participants. We facilitated 8 walking and biking surveys through New Haven neighborhoods where residents rated street conditions. 70 people participated in those. There were 9 routes throughout the city, which included 29 streets and 13 neighborhoods. In total, we assessed 22 miles of New Haven streets. We collected additional data through C4FIX, through VOG. All of this information was analyzed and incorporated into the plan. We've attended countless CMT meetings. We've canvassed our priority neighborhoods with dozens of volunteers. We've gone door to door. We've talked to dozens of community members. We've gone to community events. We've handed out hundreds of postcards. And we've sent emails. We've posted on social media. We've texted with Alders consistently. Alder Hickman has hosted us on his radio show very graciously. So I hope you can see, I really want to emphasize the important community engagement work out into this plan. This is a community plan. We take it very seriously and worked really hard. So please know that this plan really represents a lot of voices in the community. My time is up, but I just wanted to highlight some of the important health impacts that this plan will hopefully help improve. So as a resident of New Haven, I strongly encourage you to pass this plan and support the community.
Thank you, and thanks for your work.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Santori, for coming to testify. And everyone who's testified thus far. But I just really want to commend you. I know it's hard to sum it up in 3 minutes, But really, I want the record to know that Alicia Santilli Care has done a tremendous amount of work to ensure that this process is fair, equitable, and really did engage the community throughout the city, and especially these priority neighborhoods that are underserved, looking from a clinical perspective and the social determinants of health. So I know you won't take all the credit or as much credit as you deserve, but I do want to thank you for testifying for all of your work on this. Thank you. Madam Chair.
Name and address.
Sure thing, sure thing. Neil Linsky, and Playhouse Road, 416 Lighthouse Road. It's getting pretty late, so time would be too wordy, but I just want to echo the public comments that you've already heard. I think this is an absolutely important plan that needs to get adopted. You got to go out and get that federal funding. This dovetails a lot. This has a lot of interrelated aspects of climate change, addressing climate change. Really, we need this plan. Increase traffic safety. We need more traffic calming around our schools, cross city bike lanes, better bus stops, more frequent bus routes, things like that. So you have to work with the state on that aspect. But I just want to echo what's been said, and I really hope the Csep, the Board of Orders, and the city adopts this. Thank you.
Aaron did some as you heard from Sandy, I think this statement that the city routes for all is being considered after your previous agenda items about climate change and hazard mitigation. Because promoting clean streets and active transportation is a powerful climate mitigation strategy. In fact, one of the best climate mitigation strategies that any local government can adopt for the city. And I want to associate myself with the previous testimony for this plan. It's not just a good plan, but there's really a roadmap for transportation that we built on the 2010 complete streets policy and design manual built on the most recent comprehensive plan and in 2025 built on the 2019 mobility study. It's a good plan and a very robust public participation process that you've heard about from Alicia. That's really reflected in the plan. Left out about the plan when it comes to transportation plan. This plan doesn't do that, it's just the opposite. So just a word about why the timing is important. New Haven is uniquely situated and poised to take advantage of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure investment Chapter last month. We can and should be the prime beneficiary of that law if we can summon the political will to build on the preliminary conceptual work in this plan and devise more specific treatments and designs for the priority intersections discussed in the plan. So we go from schematic drawings to shovel-ready projects, right? If we can get strong collaboration from our state partners, particularly Department of Transportation, because so many of our most dangerous roads in the pavement are in fact state roads that we don't have control. And if we have the staff capacity here at City Hall to write the grants, the management grants, and do all the necessary if we do have the bandwidth to go after these new once in a lifetime funding streams with shovel-ready projects, the infrastructure bill has many potential transformational provisions. 60% increase in transportation alternatives funding, which is set aside for bicycle, pedestrian facilities, recreation, trails, etc. We've heard about the Safe Streets for All program. $2 billion of bus facilities grants, both home and competitive grants. There's funding for studies on transportation, equity, how contributes to air quality. There's funding for studies on the role like walking, disaster relief, again, related to your previous item. All in all, it's an unprecedented amount of support for climate transportation and transit projects, which places these climate-friendly projects on an equal footing with still expanding highways. So, including, I think having this plan in place, improved by the board, combined with our effective representation in the state and federal levels, those of the world, the chair of the appropriations committee, Walker, Hartford, Mars, co-chair of transportation committee, Hartford. That means New Haven is very, very well positioned as number 4 for secure funding for these streets and that transportation projects to make our city a better place to live and work. And that's why this $5 million request should be just a beginning. We should incorporate it to our comprehensive plan. It's currently up for review. We should be investing more resources in transportation planning through our operating budget on an ongoing basis. So we have staff capacity in our transportation and city planning departments to access all these grants. And we should be aggressively pursuing funding for all the intersection trees in the plan. City fully and adequately enjoy the full public health and safer streets. Infrastructure law should be maintained. Making sure these very small cities do achieve transportation.
Citizen Moore.
Just Lawrence, 70 High Street. So lifelong Connecticut resident, first year, Connecticut resident. So myself, I grew up with this on my life, went to Middlesex Community College, then you just graduated from that. Now I'm software engineer at Yale. I guess, I've heard so many different perspectives. Like, the one I want to bring up is just like the social of young people. It always felt like as you're growing up, Middletown, community college, UConn, I feel like everybody was working towards the opportunity of, I want to get out of Connecticut, I want to get out of Connecticut. And I really don't think that, I don't think that should be a thing. I don't think these kids want to leave their families and their communities behind. I think there's so many brilliant people, interesting people that are in the state and come from the state and get educated in the state and then leave the state, Especially, you have all these brilliant people come, it's an international hub. They come here, they spend 4 years and then they leave. I think a lot of that is wrapped up in transport. I think if you had a more inviting, walkable, bikeable space, you would have more people that feel, feel safer. It's not, you're not catering the city towards people who are necessarily maybe living in suburban settlements outside of the city, but you're more catering towards people who are in the area, living in the area. You're inviting more dynamic, younger urbanism to move in. I just feel like, I feel almost lucky to seeing it. It's actually a really interesting place. I hadn't even really thought about it before. When I was at UConn, when I was in Middletown, I never really thought about New Haven as a common place. But it's living here. I've been able to get rid of my car. I've been biking all the time. It's a great place, biking up East Rock Park, all throughout town, shopping. It's been great. But I don't think young people are across the state are more aware of New Haven as a possibility. When they look towards Boston, look towards New York, they don't think of New York, New Haven as a proper urban space that I think it really can be, with just some adjustments to making more separated bike lanes, making just a bit more pedestrian friendly, tying everything together, tying that Farmington Canal Trail to the rest of the city. I think all of that's better. Make it much more attractive place for people all across Connecticut. Look towards New Haven as maybe the cultural capital of Connecticut, and keep young people here. So thank you. Thank you.
That ends the list, but if there's anyone else that would like to speak, please come up. Good evening.
I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'll have to take that. I'm Carolyn Martin. I live at 135 Fountain Street, and I've lived in New Haven for over 35 years. I don't represent a particular group. I'm here as a citizen, notably a senior citizen, and somebody who has enjoyed bicycling since I was 7 years old. And I proudly say I own more bikes than I have cars. I am active in the bike community in New Haven in that I was appointed to be a member of Mayor Harp's task force to create a curricula to teach safe cycling to children. I'm very committed to the children of New Haven. I volunteered to read in one of the schools, and I volunteered for bike rodeos in the neighborhood, fitted kids for helmets. But what I really want to say is that I think New Haven has a wonderful opportunity to really emphasize its ability to be a beacon of safe transportation in all modes. This is a wonderful walking city. It's one of the reasons I moved here besides my work. I knew I could get around by bicycle. I ride my bike for my errands, and I use the bus. And I wanted to finally comment that I'm temporarily living on Forest Road, and I have been using the new bike lane, pedestrian lane. And I have to say, I feel a lot safer with it. I feel I can be seen, and it slows traffic. And the last few years, biking in New Haven, I feel has become more challenging. Sometimes it feels like the Hunger Games. You know, people are speeding by you, and certainly more running through lights and so forth. So needless to say, I support this, and I think we have the infrastructure, and we can build more on our infrastructure. Again, we have a large, talented group of biking advocates in the city. And I think everyone, especially the kids, will benefit.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carolyn Martin, and I live at 558 Orange Street. And I also come here as one of the co-founders of New Haven Month, which is a month-long celebration of agriculture that happens here. And I absolutely echo the words that you have heard tonight. And I need to pass this plan. And I think the only thing that I want to add is just how incredibly impressed and moved I've been listening to the testimony and this collaboration among advocates and residents and government and other organizations to move us closer to a vision of having safe neighborhoods for the city that we all love. So thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for allowing me to share the words.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Yeah, anyone else from the public that would like to speak on behalf of this item? For a third time, anyone from the public that would like to speak on behalf of this item, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll hear from the public voice.
Make a motion to close the public portion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Those in agreement to close the public portion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? The public portion has been closed. Do I hear a motion to move item 2? Okay, item has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on item number 2? Okay, this was the item for accepting the FEMA emergency management grant. All action on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just since it was a little while ago, wanted to reiterate the request for the previous year's financial breakdown.
Yes, thank you. Noted. Any discussion on this item? Okay, well, it's very money that comes from our way, and I would very much want to support any funds that we can get, particularly for anything having to do with emergency management. So everyone in favor of accepting these funds for item 2, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? The item carries. And I'm thinking at this point, we could probably move item 3 and 4 together. So do I hear a motion to move items 3 and 4?
Madam Chair, make a motion to move item 3 and 4.
Second.
Items have been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I think we have, yes, all the winter.
Well, I think, yeah, I think we take a minute, right? It's late, but, you know, this is like a hugely historic moment in the way that the city relates to the waterfront, particularly the era of climate change. And it's the centerpiece of, you know, our coastal climate adaptation strategy. So I think we certainly should support it, and it's clearly been the culmination of a lot of work on all levels of government, particularly with our city engineer's office. So we have some large debt of gratitude and also acknowledgement. And yeah, I do think there is this outstanding federal designation question, which hopefully gets resolved, but I don't see that as a reason not to move forward with it. And it would be, I think we should know which lines we're going to be pulling what amounts from with the capital budget. I think that is like an important detail to understand, but the plans themselves seem very, very thorough, and hopefully we'll do a lot to protect downtown Hill and the long work from what's to come over the next century. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Winter. Yeah, I think this item is a perfect example of how the federal government, the state government, and the municipality comes together for the benefit of the residents. This is where we count on our federal government to help us, our state to help us. And then we have to show that we too, as a municipality, have a hand in this as well. So, and this is a perfect example of how when everyone works together, we can really create great things. And this is an investment we're making in our city to keep our residents safe. It is an investment that needs to be made for all the reasons that we heard earlier and all the recommendations regarding flooding and heat vulnerabilities. So with that, I hope that the committee will support these items. We are voting on 3 and 4. And again, it's to keep everyone safe. So any further discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a vital part of our infrastructure, the long walk and the business district did, and I think moving forward with this plan would create an environment of safety and thinking forward. So this development, long walk will be coming up in terms of future development. This infrastructure will enhance this district. And I think I like my colleagues to support this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor of items 3 and 4, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? The ayes have it, motion carries.
Madam Chair, may I request number one?
Oh, yes, sorry. Do I hear a motion for number one?
Madam Chair, I make a motion for number one to read upon.
So here a second. Item has been moved and second to read and file item number one. All in agreement or any discussion on that? To read and file. I'm just gonna say that I think it was a very informative session. The presentations were incredibly enlightening, positive, negative, all of the above, and I think we have an idea of where we need to head, and I'm happy to see that we're actually maybe a little bit ahead of the game, and on top of it is more than anything. So anyway, I urge my colleagues, well, to support anything to do with that, but right now we just need to read and file. So, all in favor of reading and filing this item? Any nays? Abstentions? We'll read and file it. Now, item number 5 is being discharged from the committee, but we need to make an amendment to this item, so.
Madam Chair, I move item number 5.
Okay, it's gonna move in a second, but the only thing we're going to do here is, no, we actually need to retract that, so we're not moving the item. Can you retract here?
Madam Chair, I'd like to retract the move from item 5.
Okay, a second. Okay, all in favor of not.
We have to vote on it.
We have to vote on the amendment. Yeah, so all in favor of not moving it. The motion that we need to make is only to amend the title, because in the original title, which says authorizing the to provide for any funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2022, and manifest of the state routes for all citywide active transportation plan isn't a complete title, so we need to also add that we have to accept the plan. I believe all we're saying, you have the amendment. Would you like to make that amendment?
I move that amend item number 5 by substitute.
Everyone, do I hear a second to amend? Okay, so an amendment has been introduced and seconded. Go ahead and actually introduce the amendment.
Madam Chair, I move to amend item number 5 by substitution with an amendment order in front of the committee tonight.
Okay, and the new wording for the document. Okay, so moved and seconded, can you submit the new, the amendment, the amended version?
Madam Chair. So it just adds a line to the title that states that the Board of Alders is approving the plan. And then it adds a clause to the body of the order that just also states the same, that it's approving the plan.
We are adding order of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven, approving the safe route for all citywide active transportation plan and authorizing the mayor to apply for and accept funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act of 2022 in a manner consistent with the safe route of all SFA safe route citywide active transportation plan.
Okay, so the amendment has been made. Any discussion on this amendment? So there was just one line that was added to include the actual acceptance of the infrastructure and not just the grant. Is everyone in any discussion on this? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? Okay, the amendment carries. And we won't be voting on this item tonight today due to timing constraints. So we will discharge it from our committee and the full board will be voting on it at our next full board call meeting, which is Tuesday night. That concludes the vice chair on motion.
Second.
Motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That's okay. We are adjourned. Thanks very much for everybody's patience and time.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, he's still talking.